Hello, I'm Brigantia Blackbird of Blackbird's Brew, and welcome to this reboot of Journey Through the Tarot. If you happen to be following my channel a few months ago, you know that I had to take a hiatus for a period of time, and that I had started this examination of the tarot by comparing and contrasting 5 different decks. Now, I think this kind of deep dive can be super useful, but at the same time, maybe it would be better to take a simpler approach, a more grounded, everyday life, I just need to get a freaking answer or some guidance kind of approach. And for that kind of approach for the tarot, I can think of no better deck than the Housewives Tarot, which is all focused on the domestic sphere. It was put together by Paul Keppel and Jude Buffum. And the imagery of it, it's very relatable. It's everyday images. It makes the readings much more intuitive. And even though this is obviously set in a different era, I mean, this is a very, very 1950s kind of imagery and deck. And of course, you know, fashion has changed, society has changed, but it's still close enough and relatable enough to our everyday that you can see the principles of it. You look at the card and you have a much more instinctive meaning of what it's supposed to represent and how it all fits together. And I think this can be quite helpful in readings. So if this is a deck that you have, feel free to follow along with me as we go through this one card a week. And if it's not a deck that you use, well, get out your own deck and see how closely the meaning is. And also make note of subtle differences that your deck takes, because every deck's author is going to have a slightly different spin and a slightly different interpretation. So here we go. Now, as I mentioned before, this is all focused on the domestic sphere, and what it does is that it really treats the idea of work from home, whatever that form that takes, including the role of a traditional housewife. It treats that idea with dignity and respect, and it treats the actual work with dignity and respect. And if there's one lesson we could learn from last year's lockdowns, or current lockdowns if you're really, really unlucky to be at a place where they're still doing that, it really highlighted how important it is to have a well-run home that's a very pleasant environment in which everyone can do their necessary tasks and indulge their hobbies, and for a nice place for the members of the household to be able to gather and interact with, but also enough room to where they can retreat and have their private time as people all need. And we also discovered just how nightmarish it can be if you don't have a well-run household. So I think this is a lot more relatable to people than what it would have been a few years ago. And if you'll notice, this is organized like a traditional old-fashioned recipe box, which is actually kind of one of the selling points for me. You can put your name on it. And then if you'll notice, it has these tabs. So everything is organized. First you have the major arcana. So all the big ones go right here. And then afterwards you have the minor arcana. And then here, behind this tab, you can keep your instruction book, which I will go ahead and get out now. Now, I've been using this deck for a couple years now. I usually like to use it on a fairly constant basis through the month of November, because that's when we have Thanksgiving. That's when we're definitely getting into a colder season and you're becoming more introverted. You're looking within. Everything becomes much more home-centric. So I thought that was always a good time to bring it up and use it exclusively. And one of the things I've learned is that this deck, after you're done using it, it likes to go back in the box as was originally intended. It likes to be tidy. So I do go through the effort. I put all of the cards in order. I arrange once I have the suits in their proper order, I have them in the same order as what I find in this book. And it's happier. The energy is more pleasant. And so when you pick up on these things about a deck, as odd as it might seem, at least at first, for a deck to actually have preferences with what you do with it, I say go with it. It makes everything a lot easier, and you don't want the energy that's attached to this deck to get cross. It affects your readings. So, another cool thing is because this is arranged like a recipe book, I like that metaphor. You know, you put together enough recipes and you have a meal. You put enough tarot cards and you get some actual guidance or an answer to your question. And even the individual cards, they can be likened to ingredients of a recipe. Everything relates to a specific idea, a specific principle, or a specific form of energy. So let's get started. Here we have this deck's Fool, and in this deck it is a brand new, newly married housewife, and she's just starting off on her journey. And as you can tell, she's a little bit scattered at the moment. She's uncoordinated. Her outfit doesn't go together. She's got her various accoutrements floating around in the air. And she looks like she's very distracted. She doesn't know what she's doing, where she's going. And because she's kind of floating above her house, she just might get blown away by the next wind that happens to come along and end up goodness knows where. So in order for her to regain some focus and actually have a direction to go in, she's going to need a quest, or in other words, a very specific task, so she can direct her boundless energy and all of her creative instincts in order to actually accomplish something. So the key words on this card were confusion, indecision, and beginning a journey. And this can represent a lot of different points in our lives. We're all going to have times when we are deeply confused, if not by what's going on or how to interpret the behavior of people around us, or we don't quite understand ourselves, but also to understand just what on earth is going on around us. We have this whirlwind of constant activity, and because we're all connected to the internet, we can all see and hear all kinds of things that are going on constantly. It just feels like the world does not have an off switch. And it can be very confusing. It can be confusing to deal with. It can be confusing to try to understand what's going on, why it's going on, and how it might be affecting us on our own individual level. Of course, this also relates to the idea of indecision because, the Fool is this energy that almost primordial. It hasn't taken shape, and it doesn't have definition. There's endless possibilities, and you could do absolutely anything. Hence, the sense of distraction that you can easily see in this card. She's going in 10,000 different directions, and it's because she hasn't made a decision about what it is she needs to be doing at this particular moment in time. And don't we find ourselves in that state? Sometimes, quite often, or when we're trying to avoid making a choice, or we're so busy trying to keep our options open that we forget to realize rather, that in that process, we don't really end up anywhere at all. I mean, we'll end up somewhere, but the determining factor won't be our own decisions or any conscious choices or even our own preferences. It'll be wherever the tide takes us, which means we are submitting ourselves to the will of other people, and that isn't necessarily going to lead to a good result. Now, the last thing to touch on is that she does represent the beginning of a journey. The Fool has to go somewhere, or otherwise it will still remain the Fool. And we too have to make decisions and make choices and be a little bit more proactive than just reactive. Instead of things happening to us, we are making decisions and we are taking action. We are making something happen. And that's really when the beginning of our journey begins. It's when we take self-ownership of ourselves, when it's our ideas of independence, freedom, liberty, autonomy, when that isn't just something that we give lip service to, but something that we put into practice. And in order to do that, we have to have a goal, an idea, something we want to live up to, something we want to create. It's going to involve setting aside some options in favor of pursuing something that we might be able to have come into fruition. So that is the main idea of this card. I hope you're going to end up enjoying this deck as much as I do. It really is one of my favorite decks, and I'm glad it occurred to me to just focus on this exclusively as we go through the cards one by one, rather than getting bogged down and having to deal with all the various different interpretations the Fool has amongst different authors. So I hope this will be helpful. Let me know what you think in the comments below. In addition to this deck, which is of course very down to earth and very practical, I'd also like to make you aware of this book, Kitchen Table Tarot. It's by Melissa Sanova. This also takes that same very grounded, very practical, very everyday, this is my problem now, this is my issue now, this is what's happening to me now kind of approach. It's less esoteric and a little bit more, let's get real, let's get down and dirty, let's deal with what's actually in front of us. So let's take these energies and these ideas and the magic surrounding them, and let's apply it to our own lives. So whether you're an experienced practitioner or you're just starting out and you're wanting to kind of come to grips with the basics of it, this is an excellent book. I have found the content really outstanding. I have found it very helpful. It has made me a better reader, and I would recommend it to anyone. And no, I'm not getting paid to show off either this deck or this book. These are things that I have genuinely found practical. So let me know if you get the book and what impressions you might have of it. And of course, come back next week and then we will be examining The Magician. So see you then. Bye.